Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss the unfolding of one of New Jersey's most haunting cold cases, a story that will remain unsolved for years, shaking an entire community to its core. It was a humid evening in May 2010, the kind of late spring day in suburban Morris County, where the air feels thick with possibility and quiet unease, as though the world itself is holding its breath. The streets of Maplewood Heights, a small New Jersey suburb with neat lawns, white picket fences, and streets lined with old oak trees, were unusually still. Crickets buzzed in the distance, and the faint hum of car engines on the nearby highway added a low, constant drone to the otherwise peaceful neighborhood. Residents were finishing their dinner routines or heading out for evening jogs, unaware that a disappearance was about to ripple through their lives and make headlines for years to come. Melissa Grant, a 34-year-old mother of two, had always been known in Maplewood Heights as the kind of person whose laughter could light up a room. Petite, with auburn hair that fell just below her shoulders, green eyes that seemed to notice everything, and a warm, easy smile, Melissa had a presence that felt larger than her physical frame. She worked part-time as a dental hygienist at a local clinic and spent the rest of her time managing her household, volunteering at the community library, and coaching her daughter's soccer team. Her friends describe her as meticulous yet spontaneous, a woman who could plan a week's worth of meals down to minute, but also surprise her family with impromptu weekend trips to the beach. On that particular day, Melissa had been running errands. She had stopped by the local farmer's market to pick up fresh vegetables, then swung by a boutique to grab a birthday gift for her niece. The sun had been setting, casting long shadows across the town, painting the red brick sidewalks with gold. She parked her white Honda CR-V outside Maplewood Market, her children safely at home with their babysitter, and stepped into the warm, fragrant chaos of the market. The smell of fresh bread, earthy vegetables, and roasted coffee beans mingled in the spring air. She lingered a little longer than usual in the flower section, selecting a bouquet of tulips, her fingers brushing over the soft petals with familiar tenderness. She made small talk with a vendor about the unusually early bloom of the tulips that year, laughed as jokes, and handed over cash, tucking the bouquet into the passenger seat of her car. By 6:15 p.m., Melissa was back in her Honda, buckling in, checking her phone for messages. There was a text from her husband, Thomas. "Dinner's almost ready. Don't be late." She smiled, typing a quick reply. "On my way. Love you." She didn't notice the silver minivan that had lingered just beyond the market entrance, the tinted windows shielding the face of someone watching, waiting. The drive back home was short, only 10 minutes along winding roads lined with flowering dogwoods and the occasional chain-link fence surrounding private yards. Melissa hummed along to the radio, a soft pop ballad filling the car, her mind drifting to the evening ahead. She planned to help her children with homework, prepare dinner, and maybe squeeze in a short walk with the neighbor's dog. She never made it home. By 6:30 p.m., neighbors reported seeing her car parked in the driveway as usual, but there was no sign of Melissa stepping inside. Her husband, Thomas, first thought she might have gone back out to grab something from the store or take a call in the car. But when she hadn't returned by 7 p.m., a creeping worry began to set in. He called her phone straight to voicemail. He tried again. Still nothing. By 7:30, he was pacing the living room, heart hammering, calling close friends and family, asking if anyone had seen her. The air seemed heavier now, as if the suburban serenity had been pierced by an invisible tension. The first thought that crossed Thomas's mind, something that would make him gasp aloud, was unthinkable. Was she been taken? But deep down, he wanted to believe she had simply been delayed, that Melissa Grant, careful and conscientious, could not just vanish without a trace. As the minutes stretched into hours, the community of Maplewood Heights began to stir with a different energy, one that mixed confusion, fear, and disbelief. The smell of grilled dinners drifted from open windows, mingling with the damp scent of newly mown lawns, while inside homes, televisions flickered with news reports of a missing mother. By nightfall, police had been called, and the quiet suburb had transformed into a scene of controlled chaos. Detective Rachel Morgan was assigned to the case, a seasoned officer in her early 40s, with a sharp gaze that missed nothing and a voice that could calm panicked witnesses. She arrived at the Grant residence at 9 p.m. The street lamps cast pools of yellow light onto the neat sidewalks, and the soft rustle leaves created an eerie soundtrack to the evening's proceedings. Rachel immediately noticed the uneaten dinner, the open laptop still logged into a recipe website, and 2 backpacks lying untouched on the living room floor. Every detail screamed normalcy, and yet the absence of Melissa was deafening. She spoke with Thomas, who was pale, hands trembling, voice cracking with fear and frustration. "I don't understand," he said repeatedly, glancing at the clock on the wall. "She would never just leave. She wouldn't take the kids without telling me. She wouldn't." His voice faltered. Rachel gently interrupted, asking the exact times he last saw Melissa, her precise questions a thin tether pulling him back from a panic. She noted the details, the timeline, the little things. The text, the car in the driveway, the tulips on the seat, the hum-pop ballad on the radio. Outside, the night deepened. The scent of wet asphalt and freshly cut grass hung in the air. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors, questioning anyone who might have seen something. A few neighbors mentioned seeing a strange van near the market earlier. Others remember a man in a dark hoodie walking past a Honda, though their descriptions were vague. The first seeds of a chilling thought took root. This wasn't just a late-night delay. Something was wrong. And as the night grew colder, the first news crews arrived, their cameras casting bright lights over the Grant home. The subtle hum of electricity, the occasional bark of a dog, and the distant wail of sirens painted a surreal, cinematic picture of a peaceful neighborhood suddenly transformed into a stage for fear and speculation. Somewhere in the shadows, Detective Morgan couldn't shake the feeling that the answers would not be simple. By 11:30 p.m., the police had officially declared Melissa missing. Thomas sat on the living room couch, staring blankly at the unopened laptop, the bouquet of tulips now wilting in its vase. Detective Morgan left the house for a moment, stepping onto the porch to make a call to headquarters. She glanced around a quiet street, the lamplight flickering over the leafy sidewalks, and whispered to herself, "This one's going to be complicated." Little did anyone know, the complexities of this case would ripple through years of investigation, misleading leads, and cold trails before finally revealing a shocking truth that would shake the suburban town to its core. The early hours of May 6, 2010, in Maplewood Heights were restless. Streetlights flickered over dew-soaked lawns, and the occasional rustle of a nocturnal animal reminded the town that life persisted even amidst human turmoil. Inside the Grant home, Thomas sat rigid on the couch, a blanket draped awkwardly over his shoulders. He stared at the clock on the wall, its steady ticking an agonizing reminder of every minute Melissa remained unaccounted for. His fingers fidgeted, tapping the coffee table in a nervous rhythm. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the distant wail of a siren, the hum of a refrigerator, was amplified in the silence, each one a possible clue, a phantom whisper of her presence. Detective Rachel Morgan returned after a brief call to headquarters. She had requested immediate support. 9 units, additional patrol officers, and a neighborhood canvass. "We'll find her," she said, her voice steady, but inside, a knot of unease twisted tighter. She knew instinctively that missing persons cases, especially involving young mothers in suburban towns, often had layers of complexity that didn't reveal themselves overnight. Thomas recounted the evening, his voice a shaky mixture of panic and disbelief. "She went to the market, came home, and then she didn't come inside. I called, I waited, nothing. No messages, no sign." He paused, his hands trembling as he pushed back a lock of hair from his forehead. "She would never just vanish." Rachel nodded, jotting down every word. "Did anyone see her after she left the market? Did she have any plans?" Thomas shook his head. "No, she was just coming home. We had dinner planned, homework, bedtime. Nothing unusual." His eyes darted toward the tulips, now slightly wilted under the dim lamplight. Even the flowers, she'd never forget something like this. Outside, the first search parties mobilized. Local volunteers, neighbors, and police officers scoured streets, alleyways, and nearby parks. Flashlights cut through the night like slow-moving beacons. Officers checked homes and garages, questioned dog walkers and late-night joggers. Every shadow seemed suspicious, every whisper of movement in the wind a possible clue. The local media began to circulate the story early that morning. Flyers were printed with Melissa's photo, auburn hair framing her face, green eyes wide with life, a smile frozen in time. The tagline read, "Missing, Melissa Grant, 34, last seen May 5th in Maplewood Heights." Social media buzzed with neighbors sharing posts. And within hours, the story began spreading beyond the town's borders. At 8:30 a.m., a neighbor, Carla Jensen, called in with a report that would heighten concern. She claimed she had seen a silver minivan parked near the market around the time Melissa left. "I thought nothing of it at the time," she told officers. "But now, with her missing, I can't stop thinking about it. It stayed there for a long time, maybe 10 minutes. Then it drove off, slow, cautious." Rachel took down the details, but her gut instinct warned her. Early tips like this were often unreliable. People's memories distorted under stress, and the pressure of a missing person can make any mundane observation feel crucial. Still, every thread had to be pulled. By mid-morning, Thomas's parents arrived, their faces etched with worry and disbelief. His mother, Evelyn, clutched a folded handkerchief, her knuckles white. "Tommy," she whispered, "she'll be found. She has to be." But even as she spoke, her eyes betrayed a quiet fear. In families like the Grants, the notion of a mother simply vanishing was incomprehensible. As the day progressed, the town began to react. Maplewood Heights had a population of just over 12,000, a mix of families, retirees, and young professionals. Life in the suburb was normally tranquil, predictable, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's children by name. Melissa's disappearance shattered that sense of safety. Coffee shops murmured with conversations about the case. Lawn services paused their work to listen to radios. And the local grocery store displayed a flyer by the entrance. Parents watched their children with a keener eye. Neighbors checked on one another, and a creeping tension filled the air like static before a storm. Detective Morgan set up a temporary command center in the local community hall, where the search efforts were coordinated. Volunteers were organized into teams. One would search the nearby woods and trails. Another would cover the streets. Another would focus on rivers and drainage areas. Helicopters were requested for aerial scans, but cloud cover threatened to delay the first sweep. Morgan, standing in the hall with maps pinned to the walls, felt the gravity of the situation pressing down. Every missing person case carried urgency, but mothers disappearing in quiet suburban streets were especially chilling. By noon, the first tip came in from a witness named Robert Lane, a delivery driver. "I saw a woman matching her description," he told investigators, "near the old train tracks at the edge of town. She looked worried, checked her phone a lot. Then a man in a dark hoodie walked past. She didn't see him. The details were vague, but Morgan knew that cold, fragmented recollections were common in early reports. Still, they had to be pursued. As hours turned into an anxious day, the town of Maplewood Heights was gripped by unease. Children asked teachers why their mothers might go missing, and at grocery stores, strangers whispered about the possibility of a stranger in the neighborhood. Melissa's husband and parents continued to wait, clinging to hope, while the detectives and volunteers methodically combed the terrain, every moment stretching thin with uncertainty. Even within the Grant household, the absence of Melissa was palpable. Her children, ages 7 and 9, had been kept with relatives for the day. When Thomas visited them, their questions pierced his heart. "Where's Mommy?" they asked repeatedly, the innocence in their voices clashing brutally with the grim reality. Thomas could only hug them, swallow the lump in his throat, and whisper reassurances he didn't truly feel. By late evening, the police had compiled dozens of leads. A neighborhood security camera caught glimpses of a silver minivan matching Carla Jensen's description near the market, but the footage was grainy, inconclusive. Witnesses' accounts were conflicting. Someone reported seeing a suspicious man near the park. Another claimed Melissa had been spotted driving her car away, alone. The multiplicity of possibilities only deepened the mystery. Detective Morgan sat in her car outside the Grant home that night, rain beginning to drizzle, creating a soft patter on the windshield. The air smelled of wet asphalt and damp leaves, sharp and metallic. She ran her hands through her hair, staring at the softly lit house. Somewhere inside, Thomas kept vigil, hoping for the impossible. Morgan's mind was racing. The evidence was minimal, the leads conflicting, and yet she sensed that within the fog of uncertainty lay the key to solving the case. She just didn't know it yet. And as the night deepened, the first whispers of suspicion began circulating through the town. Was Melissa's disappearance the work of a stranger? Someone she knew? Or something far darker, waiting just out of sight, ready to reveal itself in the most unimaginable way? The answers would not come easily, and the next days would see the town gripped by fear, false hope, and the first signs of a complex investigation that would last for years. By the third day of Melissa Grant's disappearance, Maplewood Heights had transformed from a quiet patch of New Jersey suburbia into a community running on adrenaline, prayer circles, and fear-soaked speculation. What once felt like a town too ordinary for a tragedy now felt too small to contain one. Sidewalks once lined with strollers and dog walkers were now crowded with volunteers, officers, and reporters. Cars idled outside the Grant home at all hours. Porch lights stayed on late into the night, as if illuminating the darkness might somehow bring Melissa home. In the Grant living room, family members crowded together, their faces etched with exhaustion. The room smelled faintly of lavender, Melissa's favorite candle, and stale coffee. The curtains remained drawn, as if letting in sunlight might expose the rawness of the moment. A casserole sat untouched on the dining table, brought over by a neighbor who didn't know what else to offer except food and condolences. Thomas sat hunched on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, chin buried in his hands. His eyes were red, sleepless, haunted. Every so often, he would glance toward the front door, as if expecting Melissa to walk in with her familiar smile and a casual apology for worrying everyone. Her parents, Ruth and Gerald, sat side by side in armchairs, holding hands tightly, whispering brief words of faith and encouragement. Their stoic composure cracked only occasionally, when Ruth's voice quivered or Gerald's eyes filled with unspoken dread. Neighbors streamed in and out, offered support, hugs, homemade meals, and prayers. Each visitor carried a heavy mixture of sympathy and unease. For many, this was the first time they had faced the possibility of danger right outside their door. The illusion of safety in Maplewood Heights was slipping, and no one knew how to catch it. On the morning of May 8th, 2 days after Melissa vanished, the community held its first organized prayer vigil at St. Matthew's Church. The pews overflowed with residents, some standing in the aisles, others gathered outside, candles in hand. The scent of melting wax, the low murmur of prayers, and the soft creak of wooden pews created a somber chorus. Several people sobbed quietly. Others clutched their children tighter. Pastor Henderson, a kind man with silver hair and a calm voice, stepped forward. "We gather," he said, his voice echoing through the sanctuary, "to pray for Melissa's safe return, to support her family, to remind ourselves that hope must stay alive in our hearts." He paused. "Fear is real, but so is community. And this town, this family, will not face this in silence." The crowd nodded, eyes glistening. After the service, volunteers formed search groups, organizing themselves with surprising efficiency. Mothers carpooled to search the local parks. Teenagers combed through wooded areas near the high school trails, and retired veterans coordinated grid searches near the old freight station. People who barely knew Melissa found themselves walking miles, calling her name through echoing fields and empty culverts. "Melissa," they shouted. "Melissa, can you hear us?" Their voices carried through trees and across open fields, swallowed by the wind. Still, no trace. At the community hall, now functioning as the official search command center, Detective Rachel Morgan moved through a room buzzing with controlled chaos. Maps were spread across long folding tables. Pins marked key locations. The market, Melissa's home, the wooded areas, the train tracks, the old quarry. White boards with timelines, witness statements, and possible leads filled the walls. Officers moved in and out, reporting findings or dead ends. Volunteers lined up for instructions. Rachel's voice cut through the noise. "If anyone has footage from door cameras or dash cams from that evening, we need it. Any footage, even if you think it's irrelevant. Her tone was urgent but steady. Dozens of residents began uploading videos. Hours of footage to be reviewed frame by frame. Still no breakthrough. Inside the command center, Rachel monitored each new lead. She felt the weight of responsibility press down harder with each fruitless hour. She had handled missing person cases before, but something about this one gnawed at her. The neatness of Melissa's life. The suddenness of her disappearance. The eerie lack of evidence. "You okay, Rachel?" asked Officer Daniel Mercer, a longtime colleague. His gruff voice carried genuine concern. "No," she admitted quietly, "but we'll keep pushing." Community support soared, but so did whispers. Rumors floated freely among neighbors, some careless, some cruel. Suspicion began to settle like dust on every surface. Some whispered that Melissa had run away. Others muttered that she might have been having an affair. Some wondered if she had been taken by someone she knew, and a chilling few suggested something darker. "What, she's already gone?" These whispers reached the Grant family despite attempts to shield them. When Thomas overheard two volunteers doubting Melissa's fate, he stormed out of the house, pacing the front lawn until his mother coaxed him back inside. "Don't listen," she pleaded. "People talk when they're scared." But Thomas could not escape the gnawing question. What if they were right? On May 9th, the search took a new turn. A group of volunteers found something unusual near the old drainage creek behind Willow Bend Park. A piece of fabric tangled among the roots of a fallen tree. Light blue, torn, faint traces of dirt and water damage. It looked eerily similar to the blouse Melissa had been wearing in the market security footage. Rachel rushed to the scene, heart pounding. The fabric was collected, bagged, and sent for analysis. The volunteers stood in a tight cluster, their expressions a mix of fear and hope. "Do you think it's hers?" someone asked. Rachel didn't answer. Not yet. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Within hours, text messages and social media updates exploded. Possible evidence found. Police investigating. Could be Melissa's clothing. The discovery lifted hope for some and deepened terror for others. In the Grant household, Ruth clutched her rosary tightly and whispered, "Lord, please bring her back." That evening, a crowd gathered at the park's edge, though police quickly set up barricades to prevent contamination of the scene. Flashing lights flickered against tree trunks and rippling water. Officers scoured the area, collecting soil samples, checking for footprints, and examining any signs of disturbance along the creek bed. Thomas arrived as the officers were wrapping up their search. He stood several yards away, staring at the spot where the fabric was found, breathing hard. Detective Morgan approached him gently. "We don't know if it's hers," she said. "We'll run tests." His voice cracked, but it could be. The thought hung heavy between them. By the morning of May 10th, the community's energy had shifted. The initial adrenaline was fading, replaced by emotional exhaustion, but determination remained. Search parties continued. Fundraisers were organized. Flyers were handed out at every gas station, grocery store, and intersection. Everything seemed to be in motion, except the case itself. For Melissa's family, the days blended together, an endless cycle of waiting, hoping, fearing, praying. Thomas's sister, Emily, took over caring for the children, shielding them from the media storm. Melissa's parents spoke to reporters with quivering voices, pleading for any information. "We just want our daughter home." Ruth cried during one televised interview, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please, if anyone knows anything, please come forward." Their plea echoed across New Jersey. Yet behind the scenes, cracks began to form in the united front. Stress seeped into relationships. Old conflicts resurfaced. Tensions rose as fear twisted everything it touched. That afternoon, a heated argument erupted in the Grant living room. Thomas insisted the police weren't doing enough. Gerald countered that they were doing everything possible. Emily argued they needed to hire a private investigator. Voices escalated, cutting through the house like jagged glass. The children, overhearing the commotion, began to cry. Emily hurried to comfort them, whispering soothing words she didn't quite believe. Outside, neighbors paused on the sidewalk, hearing the raised voices through the open windows. The town's collective heart tightened. Later that night, after the chaos subsided, Thomas sat alone in Melissa's chair by the living room window. The neighborhood was quiet, save for a distant dog barking and the soft hum of a street lamp. He stared out into the darkness, eyes heavy with tears. "I should have gone looking sooner," he whispered to the empty room. "I should have known something was wrong." But regret changed nothing, and the truth remained locked behind a veil no one could yet see through. At the command center, Detective Morgan stared at the fabric analysis report freshly delivered from the lab. Her pulse skipped as she read the results twice to be sure. The fibers matched. It was Melissa's blouse, and the location where it was found suggested something far more disturbing than anyone had dared to say aloud, because that creek led directly toward the abandoned rail yard, a place with a history, a place no one wanted to believe was connected. But the evidence pointed there, almost unmistakably, and Rachel felt the first dark shadow of a bigger mystery settling over the case. She grabbed her jacket, turned to Officer Mercer, and said quietly, "We need to go there. Now." Detective Rachel Morgan had been to the abandoned rail yard before, but never under circumstances like this. It sat at the edge of Maplewood Heights like a scar, fenced off, rusted out, and mostly reclaimed by nature. Most residents avoided it except for the occasional teenager looking for a place to drink or smoke away from adults. The place had long been associated with trouble, though never anything as sinister as a missing mother. But as Rachel stepped out of her cruiser that night, the wind whipping her jacket open like a warning, she felt a surge of dread. The rail yard was a labyrinth of decaying freight cars, broken concrete slabs, and overgrown weeds. If Melissa had been taken here, or worse, finding answers would be like searching for a whisper in the dark. "Let's start by the south entrance," Rachel instructed Officer Mercer, shining her flashlight into the black tangle of twisted metal. If anything or anyone came through that creek, they'd end up somewhere around here. Her voice echoed slightly, swallowed quickly by the vast emptiness of the yard. They moved slowly, methodically, checking every corner where the moonlight didn't reach. The smell of rust mixed with damp soil drifted in the air. Their footsteps crunched over broken glass and gravel. A train car door groaned in the wind, sounding like a low, distant moan. Rachel's pulse ticked upward. Mercer stopped suddenly. "Over here," he called out. Rachel approached, kneeling beside him as he pointed to a patch of flattened grass near the fence. It looked recently disturbed. Footprints in the dirt, roughly the size of a woman's. Another set larger overlapped them. Her heart tightened. "You think this could be her?" Mercer asked quietly. "It's possible. Take photos. Mark everything." But the prints were smudged, partially washed away by rain. They told a story, but not clearly enough. As they continued deeper into the yard, Rachel's flashlight swept across something odd, a discarded keychain, half buried under leaves. She leaned closer. A small metal charm, an engraved letter M, glinted under the beam. Her breath hitched. Melissa's keychain. Thomas had mentioned she kept it attached to her car keys, and it was missing after the disappearance. Rachel bagged it, her stomach knotting. Signs were piling up, but the location, the timing, none of it made sense. If someone had taken Melissa, why here, and why leave so few traces? Behind her, Mercer suddenly stiffened. "Rachel, over here." His voice was strained. Rachel rushed toward him, and her heart nearly stopped. In the corner of the clearing, embedded in the mud, lay a shoe. Not just any shoe, a women's flat, navy blue with a small silver buckle. The same shoes Melissa had worn the night she vanished. Rachel crouched, examining it under the flashlight. No blood, no obvious tearing. Just mud and something else. A faint smear. Could be dirt. Could be something more disturbing. She stood slowly, staring out over the rail yard as a wave of frustration and dread washed over her. Pieces of Melissa's trail led here, but not Melissa herself. And the longer she stayed, the more she felt the presence of something wrong, as if the air itself vibrated with unspoken secrets. A sudden rustle nearby made both officers whip their lights toward a cluster of shrubs. For a tense second, they held their breath, but it was only a raccoon startled by their searchlights. Rachel exhaled shakily. Her nerves were fraying. "We'll sweep the area again with a full team tomorrow," she said finally. "Tonight, we've done all we can without compromising the scene." As they walked back to their vehicles, Rachel looked over her shoulder one last time. The shadows seemed to shift, as though something was hiding just beyond the reach of her light. Something watching. The next morning, the discovery of Melissa's shoe and keychain hit the news. Reporters swarmed the search command center. Camera crews camped outside the Grant home. Microphones were thrust into strangers' faces. The story exploded across New Jersey's TV networks and social platforms. Evidence found at abandoned rail yard. Headlines read, "Possible clothing tied to missing mother. Investigation intensifies." The town's anxiety reached a fever pitch. Police reinforcements arrived from neighboring departments. 9 units searched the rail yard inch by inch. Officers sifted through debris, logs, soil, drainage grates, anything that might hold a clue. But after 48 hours of grueling work, nothing conclusive was found. No body, no clear sign of struggle, no confirmation that Melissa had been there alive or dead. Just eerie traces, like a ghost trail leading detectives into a black hole. Inside the Grant home, tension was reaching breaking point. Family members were exhausted, running on caffeine, fear, and desperate hope. Melissa's sister-in-law, Emily, began questioning every detail the evening Melissa disappeared. "Someone had to see something," she said repeatedly. She didn't just vanish. But frustration turned inward. Arguments erupted. Fear made tempers sharper. When a reporter implied a possibility of domestic involvement, the town buzzed with speculation that quickly reached Thomas. He slammed the door when he heard it. "I didn't do anything," he shouted, voice shaking. "Why would I ever hurt Melissa?" But suspicion, once seated, grew like wildfire. Even neighbors who sympathized whispered among themselves. "He was the last to see her. He called late. Something doesn't add up." Detectives questioned him formally. Routine procedure, but painful nonetheless. Thomas recounted the events again and again. He broke down twice. "I loved her," he whispered, voice crumbling. "Please find her." Rachel believed he was telling the truth, but believing wasn't enough. She needed proof, one way or another. The investigation spiraled into a complex web of false leads. A jogger claimed he saw a woman matching Melissa's description near the old quarry. Officers searched the area. Nothing. A truck driver insisted he saw a silver minivan driving erratically the night she disappeared. They tracked down 3 similar vans. None connected to the case. A teenage boy said he had recorded strange noises behind the park that night, hinting at a possible abduction. The audio turned out to be raccoons fighting. Every lead felt promising at first, only to dissolve into another dead end. On May 15th, a full 10 days after her disappearance, the case hit its most painful low point yet. A passerby discovered a black tote bag near a retention pond behind a strip mall 2 towns over. Inside were personal items, tissues, a water bottle, and a phone charger. It resembled Melissa's bag, but under forensic analysis, it wasn't hers. Twice that day, helicopters circled local rivers after someone reported seeing something floating. Both times it was debris, branches, plastic. The Grant family's hope rose and fell in agonizing waves. Every phone call made Thomas jump. Every police cruiser in the neighborhood made his heart race. Every night, he replayed the last conversation he had with Melissa over and over like a broken record. Rachel felt the pressure weighing heavily on her shoulders. She returned to the rail yard, walking its quiet paths, reviewing evidence, retracing steps. Something about the case gnawed at her, a missing piece she couldn't articulate. "Maybe we're missing something simple," she murmured as she stood in the dim glow of her flashlight. "Something right in front of us." Then there was a mysterious silver minivan. Multiple witnesses mentioned it. Some claimed it had tinted windows. One said it was older, maybe early 2000s. Another swore the driver wore a baseball cap, but the tips conflicted so severely that they almost cancel each other out. Still, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that the van mattered. On May 20th, a new lead emerged from an unexpected source. A local mechanic named Devin Ross, an introverted man in his mid-30s, walked into the police station with a guilty expression. I'm not sure if this is anything, he stammered, but I might have seen something the night she went missing. Rachel leaned forward. Go on. I work late sometimes. I was closing up the shop around 9 that night. I saw a van stop at the corner across the street. Old, maybe 2005 model. Silver. The driver sat there a long time, watching. Didn't buy anything. Didn't get out. Rachel's pulse quickened. Could you see him clearly? Not his face. But Devin swallowed. He had a bumper sticker. Bright yellow. Circular. I remember because it glowed under the streetlight. Do you remember what it said? Devin shook his head. Sorry, I just remember the color. Rachel thanked him and filed the tip. But something about his body language nagged at her. Was it fear? Nervousness? Or simply the pressure of talking to police? She couldn't be sure. But the bumper sticker detail was huge. A van like that couldn't be common. Officer Mercer tracked down registered silver vans in neighboring zip codes. 10 fit the approximate model. Only 2 had yellow circular stickers. One belonged to a pastor. The other to a man named Wayne Lockridge, age 48, a warehouse worker with a minor record for disorderly conduct. The name sent a chill down Rachel's spine, because she recognized it. Months earlier, Wayne had been questioned in a different disturbance case, a domestic complaint. Nothing came of it. His partner dropped the charges, but Rachel had remembered his unsettling demeanor. Now, he owned a van matching witness descriptions. She and Mercer drove to his listed address. The house was dark. The van, silver, older model, sat parked in the driveway. As Rachel approached, the hairs on her arms rose. A bumper sticker glowed faintly under the street lamp. Yellow. Circular. Rachel's breathing slowed. She exchanged a tense glance with Mercer. This is it, she whispered. But as she stepped closer, her flashlight beam landed on something else. Something far worse. Something sitting in the van's back seat, barely visible through the window. Her heart dropped, because it looked like... No, it couldn't be. She leaned in, pulse hammering. Whatever she saw inside that van would change the direction of the investigation completely, and reveal that the trail they'd been following was leading somewhere far darker than they ever imagined. The shift from active investigation to the slow crawl of a cold case never happens in a single moment. It sneaks in, first as doubt, then as fatigue, and finally as silence. For the investigators working Melissa Carter's disappearance, the silence arrived with a weight that settled over the case like a heavy winter snowfall, covering everything, every lead, every early theory, every hopeful tip, with a thick, suffocating numbness. It had been 11 months since Melissa vanished. 11 months of flyers curling in the rain on telephone poles. 11 months of interviews that led nowhere. 11 months of her daughters waking to an empty kitchen chair where their mother should have been. By the time the anniversary approached, even the most resilient neighbors stopped glancing over their fences, hoping to see her walk to the yard. Detective Reynolds sat at his desk in the Stoneberry Police Department's cramped investigative unit, flipping through the case binder he had practically memorized. The edges were worn soft from overuse, and tabs marked every section. Timeline, interviews, forensics, search logs. He had added so many sticky notes that the whole binder looked like a bristling neon hedgehog. And still, nothing inside it had ever spoken loudly enough to break the silence. That morning, he opened the section labeled evidence. There wasn't much. A few strands of hair collected from Melissa's hairbrush for comparison. Fibers from the driver's seat of her Ford Taurus. Soil samples from her yard and the wooded area behind Maple Ridge Elementary. A single gold earring found inside the car, one her sister Rebecca swore Melissa wore every day. And of course, the most baffling item of all, the grocery bag with a half-wilted lettuce and receipt timestamped just 15 minutes before Melissa allegedly pulled into her driveway. As far as evidence went, it was frustratingly ordinary. Still, Reynolds looked at each item again, as if staring long enough would reveal patterns he'd missed. There's always something, he muttered. The case doesn't go cold. People do. But cases also went cold when evidence refused to cooperate. Back in the early days of the investigation, the forensics team had worked methodically. They dusted Melissa's car inside and out. They swabbed for DNA on the steering wheel, the door handle, the interior controls. The lab found smudged fingerprints belonging to her, her husband, and traces of her daughters. Nothing unusual. No trace of an outsider. No foreign DNA. Not even a stray fiber that didn't belong. The passenger seat held an imprint, likely from a purse or bag, but no new trace evidence had been found there either. When Reynolds asked the girls whether Melissa ever let strangers ride with her, they shook their heads. Mom didn't like giving rides to people she didn't know, 10-year-old Clara said quietly. The forensics report had frustrated everyone. It suggested Melissa got home safely. It suggested she entered the house alone. And it suggested, infuriatingly, that she simply vanished into the air between the driveway and her living room, something that never made sense to anyone, least of all Reynolds. He slammed the case binder shut and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "There's something in there," he whispered. "We just don't see it yet." When a case grows cold, the community starts to move on even if they don't mean to. The flyers fade. The news coverage slows. The search volunteers return to their routines. But for a few people, the cold case becomes a constant hum in the background of everything. One of those people was Melissa's older sister, Rebecca Armstrong. She still called the police station at least once a week, sometimes twice. She called to remind them of dates, of memories, of stories Melissa had told her, of people she didn't trust. She called to share whatever she dreamed the night before. Every call ended the same way, her voice trembling slightly, her frustration spilling over. "Please don't let them forget her, Detective Reynolds. Please." "I won't," he always said. And he meant it. But he also knew that meaning something and proving it were two different battles. The turning point for Rebecca came one cold February afternoon, 2 months before the 1-year mark. She drove to the police station, marched to the front door, and placed a thin manila envelope directly onto Reynolds' desk. "I need you to look at this," she said. "What is it?" "I didn't want to tell anyone this before. I thought maybe I was imagining it, but I'm not. The house, Melissa's house, someone has been in it, more than once." Reynolds stiffened. "What do you mean?" She opened the envelope and pulled out a series of photographs. They were taken on different days, over several weeks. He could tell by the dates stamped in the corner. The photos showed small things at first: a laundry basket out of place, a window that was closed one day and open the next, a kitchen drawer left askew. But the later photos showed something else entirely. A corner of Melissa's closet disturbed, a box of family letters moved, a bathroom cabinet left open with items slightly rearranged. "Do you lock the house when you leave?" Reynolds asked. "Every time," Rebecca said. "I double-check. I've changed the locks twice." "Has anything been taken?" "No," she said, "but someone has gone through things. Someone was looking. Looking for what?" "I don't know," she whispered, her voice cracking. "But someone thinks there's something in that house." Reynolds took the photos to the forensic team. They dusted for prints. They examined every window and lock. But whoever had been in the house knew exactly how to avoid leaving evidence. Or they knew the house well enough that their fingerprints wouldn't be considered suspicious. Nothing usable turned up. Not a single actionable lead. The case returned to silence. By the summer of 2011, the Carter case was officially designated inactive, though Reynolds refused to call it that in front of the family. City budget constraints pulled him on to new assignments. Without new evidence, there was little he could do but revisit old interviews and search logs. The case file grew heavier, but not smarter. Still, Melissa's name never left his thoughts. The night before the anniversary of her disappearance, he returned to the car one more time. Not physically, but in the reports. He reread everything, retraced every theory. Was the scene staged? Had Melissa left willingly? Had someone forced her to pull into the driveway without leaving a trace? As he pored through those pages, one detail suddenly caught his eye. Something he had written himself. A small note, barely noticeable. Tire marks approximate 7 foot behind vehicle. Possible secondary car? Inconclusive. Weather compromised. He froze. The tire marks. They were faint, barely photographed before the rain washed them away. The early assumption was that they belonged to Samuel's car. He parked behind Melissa, frequently when they juggled schedules. But that day, Samuel wasn't home until hours later. Reynolds flipped through the timeline. Samuel had been at work until 5:17 p.m. Melissa got home at 4:42 p.m. The detectives had assumed the tire marks predated her return or were unrelated. But what if they weren't? He focused on the measurement in the report. 7 feet behind, slightly angled, a partial tread imprint of a tire with a missing outer groove. That wasn't standard wear. That was deliberate. He pushed away from his desk so quickly that his chair rolled back and hit the wall. What if we had the second car the whole time? He whispered. But without a full cast, without clear photos, without preserved evidence, he had no way to confirm it. Still, something had shifted. For the first time in months, the silence around the case cracked, just slightly, and then something happened that pushed the case into its deepest freeze yet. In October 2011, 6 months after the house break-ins and 15 months after Melissa's disappearance, the forensic labs in Trenton suffered a devastating storage failure. Temperature control malfunction. Biological samples compromised. It affected dozens of open cases, including Melissa's, her hair comparison samples, the trace fibers from the car, the soil samples. They were no longer viable. The earring could be tested for DNA, but without a baseline profile to compare to, the likelihood of a useful match diminished. The official notice arrived on Reynolds' desk with a bold header, Sample Degradation Event. He slammed his fist against the table in frustration. The cold case had just gotten colder. Stoneberry moved on. The neighborhood kids grew up. Samuel remarried 2 years later to a woman named Lindsay. The daughters, Emily and Clara, remained quiet, withdrawn, shadows of the cheerful girls their mother once dropped off at school every morning. The town still whispered Melissa's name occasionally, but even those whispers faded as time passed.